Kazuo is a pathetic loser obsessed with books, but everything changes when he turns into a dog and starts living with a popular girl who likes to play with scissors. Before all of this cheese happened, Kazuo has a favorite author named Akiyama Shinobu, whose gender is unknown, but is a best-selling author who makes Shakespeare look like an amateur. Then, the writer disappears and Kazuo refuses to die before reading the next book. In the present, Kazuo is in a cafe when a robber decides to pull out a shotgun. The robber aims his gun at Kazuo and a female customer, telling them to drop their pants and give him their money. But the female customer doesn't care and continues writing. The robber goes for the shot, but Kazuo stops him and they wrestle for the shotgun while the girl continues writing. The robber wins the fight and shoots Kazuo in the head. Kazuo dies and all he hears is the dumb writing, not caring about him getting clapped. Then, Kazuo starts seeing flashbacks of his life. He is about to be sent to isekai to help Kazuma and his useless party, but the Anon gods pity him and turn him into a dog instead. Kazuo wakes up in front of Afro Samurai, and he keeps calling Kazuo a dog. Kazuo sees his own reflection and freaks out to see that he is now a dog. Later he finds out that Afro Samurai saved him from being abandoned and brought the dog into the pet store to be adopted. Kazuo can't stand not reading a book, and Afro comes in reading Peppa Pig, and Kazuo begs Afro to let him read it. Afro doesn't understand his barks and gives Kazuo food instead. Later, Kazuo begs the Anon gods to give him a book to read, and they answer by sending a budget a cane with a scissors fetish to adopt him. She asks Afro how much for the book Addicted Dog, and Afro refuses to sell the next album and the Chipmunk remake protagonist. The girl pulls up her scissors and threatens to cut Afro's hair off if he doesn't sell her the dog. Later, she takes Kazuo to her apartment, and Natsuno wants to cut the dog up as his barks hurt her head. She explains that she can understand the dog's thoughts like Dr. Dolittle, and it annoys the hell out of her. She introduces herself as Natsuno and claims that she has massive melons, but Kazuo sees her non-existent puppies and realizes that she's a fraud. Then he realizes that she's the girl who ignored the robbery that caused his death, and Natsuno gets upset and leaves. Natsuno takes a different approach, wearing lingerie to test the dog's degeneracy, but Kazuo only gets excited by books, and her lack of melons makes his desires shrink. She offers to let him stay and asks what he wants, and Kazuo explains that he's desperate to read books. Then Natsuno shows him her book collections, and Kazuo is excited to read the millions of books she owns. Kazuo walks around and sees the books of Akiyama Shinobu, which makes him cream himself, and Natsuno explains that Akiyama Shinobu is her, which shocks Kazuo. From then on, Kazuo lives with his favorite author, who is a sadist and has a scissors kink. She can cook and do martial arts, to which she explains that the more things she's good at, the more things she can put in her books. He praises her commitment, but feels sad that her commitment doesn't help her melons to grow, which pisses her off to cut his fur bald. Then the news outlet informs about the robbery, and the culprit behind it is an edgy-looking dude named Toji. They show the victim's apartment, and Kazuo gets sad that he forgot to delete his browser history. Natsuno sees her dog being sad and plans to make it up to him. The next day, she offers to put him in dog collars, but Kazuo refuses to be put in a degenerate bondage. Natsuno calls him a and he says, "Damn right I am," as he is a dog. It annoys Kazuo that she can read his mind, and she teases him that she caught him the other night thinking of putting her in a collar and making Shu Tucker proud by making dog babies with her. Then they exit the apartment to go on a walk, and Natsuno shows the dog her very own Wikipedia page that has her fake 3 sizes. They continue the walk, and Kazuo looks up at her skirt to see that she went full commando for their walk. They go to the old pet shop, and Natsuno uses his aura to stare daggers at Afro and his yee haircut. Then they walk past a red-haired maid named Saki and a narcissistic TikTok model named Maxi, who keeps trying to get Natsuno's attention. Maxi challenges Natsuno to a strip-off, but Natsuno is not interested as she has nothing to show for it. Then, they stop in front of a library, and Natsuno offers Kazuo to go in, but he refuses. They end up at Kazuo's old doo-doo apartment, and Natsuno explains that they are there for some unfinished business. Kazuo explains that his real room is number 102, but he turned it into his jizz-filled Sticky Man cave and moved to room 100, and one as his distant relative is the owner of the apartment, and they let him do so. Natsuno wants to go into room 102 while Kazuo tells her not to. They go in anyway and find a newspaper from the date before, which confuses them, as no one should be in that room as Kazuhito died a long time ago. Natsuno goes full Sherlock Holmes and explains that after the robber murdered Kazuhito, the robber took his wallet and keys and tried to make room number 100 and to his hiding place to avoid the police. The robber realized that the key he holds is room 101 and made that room his hiding place, while everyone is busy cleaning and investigating room 102 as they thought the dead Kazuhito lived there. The robber is right next door, which was Kazuhito's real room. The robber apologizes before running away and they chase him down. They keep chasing him and end up in a standoff. The robber shows his support for gender equality before giving Natsuno the two-piece chicken nugget combo, using her own book to beat her up. He pulls out another book and tells them that he refuses to get caught before reading Natsuno's next book, which Kazuhito understands completely. Natsuno has enough and tells this robber to square up. The robber uses a fighting technique from her book and turns into Ultra Instinct Goku to push back Natsuno. He starts skipping around like Prime Muhammad Ali, and Natsuno realizes that it's also a technique from her book. His godly technique, taken from Sailor Moon, manages to hypnotize Natsuno, and the robber beats the living shit out of her like he's a drunk husband coming home to his wife from the 60s. Natsuno gets back up as it turns out she used full counter, using her scissors to counter the robber, and drops his books. She uses her scissors and goes full Akame put the robber in his place. She kicks him hard, almost causing him to fall off the bridge and into the highway while knocking him out. She offers Kazuhito to get his revenge by pushing the robber to his death as payback, but Kazuhito doesn't have the dog in him and saves him instead. Natsuno calls Kazuhito a wimp who has no guts, but he tells her that after watching Vinland Saga, he has no enemies. She demands for the robber to die as she feels guilty for being the reason Kazuhito died in the first place. She starts screaming that it's her fault, and the dog pushes her down to calm her. He starts preaching like Naruto to change her heart, while understanding her pain and succeeding in changing her. Later, Natsuno gets inspiration for her new book after wanting to send the dog to isekai by gutting him out of love. Her mentioning her book reminds Kazuhito about the books he left at his old, and he refuses to leave them behind as they aren't his babies. His words make Natsuno consider making babies with the dog, but she is worried that her dog does not have enough love sausage on him. Kazuhito feels creeped out and starts calling her the new Shane Dawson, who has no melons. She gets angry and chases him down to cut him bald for the disrespect. Meanwhile, Kazuhito's sister, Madoka, is praying for him after his death. Kazuhito has a dream about her sister waking him up without getting into his pants like other Alabama sisters, but Natsuno shows up in his dream and wakes him up completely from the sight of her anicap pepperonis. Later, he sees an unknown girl asleep in the apartment. She wakes up and starts tweaking heavily, and Kazuhito realizes that she's the same as Natsuno, being able to read his mind. She starts her delusion like a weeb about being a demon king and wanting to take over the world for the god inside the dog's body, and Kazuhito realizes that this girl is on that Walter White crack. Natsuno shows up and reveals to Kazuhito that they are actually partners. Natsuno shows the crazy girl's name card, and it turns out she is Natsuno's editor named Suzuna. Kazuhito is geeking out at the meeting between his favorite author and editor, but is surprised to hear that Suzuna calls Natsuno a washed and trash author. Suzuna offers different solutions, including for her to get a BBL on her tiny melons, while Suzuna herself has bowling balls as jugs, which pisses off Natsuno the cutter. Suzuna enjoys getting cut and feels cheated for not being Natsuno's only dog anymore, which Natsuno can violate every night. Then Kazuhito starts thinking about Natsuno's fall off and realizes that she needs to get high on adrenaline and face incidents to be able to write. Before leaving, Suzuna warns them that there is a slasher in the city, but the dog is not worried because Budget Akane is scarier. Then they talk about her sudden fall in her writing, and Natsuno tells him that it has been happening for 3 months, which was when he died. They both realize that it's his fault, and he happily gets violated by her scissors. Days later, Suzuna returns and informs them that the slasher has taken more victims after cutting them up with his weapons. Then, Natsuno and Kazuhito start a side quest to start an investigation and find the slasher themselves. They end up at the bookstore, and a little stupid girl named Ioa is violating the hell out of Kazuhito, while Natsuno asks the clerk for information about the slasher. She reveals that all of the victims of the slasher have a connection to Natsuno's books. Later, an office worker slips in front of them, and he explains that his friend was also attacked after reading Natsuno's book. They walk around to look for more information and meet the Afro samurai who is afraid of budget Akemi, and later meet a group of sweaty and stinky muscular dudes who ask them to join the fun. Then they walk past Maxi again, who keeps trying to get their attention, and Kazuhito realizes who she is, a famous writer who is also an idol. Maxi is one of 3 of the biggest writers in the business aside from Natsuno, and Natsuno is not happy that Maxi knows her true identity. Natsuno tries to walk away, but Maxi sees her weakness in the form of her tiny melons and rubs into Natsuno by stripping and posing to make her melons look bigger than they already are in front of Natsuno's flat irons. It triggers Natsuno, and they get into a Tekken battle at Maxi's main security. Johnny Sins stops her and takes her away. Then, Kazuhito accuses Natsuno of being the culprit for her love of scissors, but someone suddenly screams like a choking cow in the distance. They investigate, and it turns out to be the Afro, and the slasher cuts his glorious hair to reveal his bald spots. Natsuno looks around the crime scene, finds the culprit, and chases him while Kazuhito plays with Afro's chopped hair. He realizes that Afro must have Natsuno's book as well and sees one of the books under a very obvious trap. He goes to read it and gets trapped. He remembers when he first showed the books to Madoka and feels like a proud brother for having a sister like her. Later, Kazuhito wakes up back at his apartment and his sister, Madoka, is there with him. Madoka is popular, smart, and athletic, and is what every parent dreams of being their children, while Kazuhito is the complete opposite, being a dude who gets off to books. One day, a guy confessed to Madoka, and she got angry at her brother for supporting her relationship instead of treating her like all the other fictional stepsisters. Despite all her perfection, she's a horrible chef who makes curry taste like a gelatinous cat piss. Meanwhile, Natsuno is still chasing the culprit and loses him. At the apartment, Madoka reveals that she can hear her brother's thoughts and starts getting freaky with the dog, telling him that they will be together forever. Kazuhito feels something is off and tests her to reveal that she can't actually hear his thoughts, but it still confuses him how she knows that he is her brother. Suddenly, Madoka starts crying, regretting what happened to her brother, but is now glad that they can now have a healthy relationship between a human sister and a dog brother where they can make babies. She then brings out her world-famous curry, and it looks as red as lava, and she forces the dog to eat it. She stops and leaves to buy some pickles, while Kazuhito has to escape. Natsuno pulls up and tortures the dog to explain why he cheated on her with Madoka. Kazuhito explains that it's her sister, and manages to survive the abuse for another day. Later, Natsuno explains that she lost the culprit and she found her own book as a clue. They start wondering why the culprit would have Natsuno's books, and they realize that Madoka has a connection with the slasher. Natsuno sees this as a good chance to take revenge against her for kidnapping her doggy daddy and hurting her heart. Meanwhile, Madoka is hunting for Kazuhito. The next day, Madoka is nowhere to be found and they continue with the investigation. The editor, Suzuna, shows up and starts tweaking like a degenerate weirdo, wanting both Natsuno and Kazuhito to double-team her. Natsuno asks for information about the slasher, but Suzuna proves to be useless, as all she cares about is to satisfy her pain-loving desires like darkness. Before Suzuna leaves, she reveals that a girl is crying in the park while pissing on Natsuno's books, which gives them the idea that it's Madoka. Then, they go to the park and confront Madoka. The psychotic sister starts talking trash to Natsuno for luring Kazuhito with her small melons, but Natsuno quickly roasts her crispy, calling her a degenerate sister who only wants to get piped by her dog of a brother. Kazuhito tries to stop the beef between the two, and Natsuno agrees to go easy on Madoka, with the condition that she gets to play with his puppy Littlefeet later. She asks Madoka about the slasher case, and her answer gives them suspicion that she is the slasher before Natsuno uses a smoke bomb to disappear like Batman. Later, Natsuno suspects that Madoka is jealous as Madoka sees Akiyama Shinobu as her rival after Kazuhito keeps talking about her books to her, which annoys her to see that her brother prefers his books to Alabama loving his sister. Natsuno adds that what's more than jealousy is that Madoka feels regret that her brother's love for books cost him his life after he moved to Tokyo for his passion instead of going back to his family, and this made Madoka angry at Akiyama Shinobu and her books. Even after his death, Kazuhito has accepted his fate, but he was always too scared to think about how his family felt and how they coped with his death. Then, Kazuhito asks Natsuno to lend her strength in stopping his sister, as he now feels that Natsuno is someone he can trust. Natsuno feels happy seeing his honesty and accepts his request to help him. Suddenly, Madoka barges in and grabs Kazuhito while Natsuno is squaring up to fight. Natsuno reveals like a supervillain that she is Akiyama Shinobu and Madoka goes crazy. She starts blaming Natsuno for taking Kazuhito away from her and causing his death. Natsuno tries the Naruto approach and preaches to her about disappointing her brother through her reckless actions and reveals that her brother died protecting her from her robber. She tells Madoka that Kazuhito has become the reason why she continued writing after he sacrificed himself for her as one of her precious readers, and that as an author, her feelings have reached out to him. Madoka tries to cope, but Natsuno tells her to stop being delusional and wake up. Madoka refuses to accept it, jumps off the building and aims for the bushes while holding the dog. Later, they survive the fall and Madoka apologizes to the dog for thinking he's her dead brother. For weeks, she has been looking for his brother, putting traps, and hunting him down while believing that Kazuhito is still there in some shape or form. Kazuhito cheers her up by saying, "My sister's cheeks are better than your sister's cheeks," and Madoka feels better already. Natsuno shows up and they restart their beef. They go head-to-head and Madoka summons a weapon called Tuna Eater like she's Urza Scarlet. Natsuno praises her weapon and pulls out her own weapon, the almighty scissors, Hazajiro, to counter Madoka's weapon. They attack each other and match each other's strengths. Madoka ups her game and activates her weapon to level up into a chainsaw. She goes to attack Natsuno, but she dodges Madoka's every attack. Natsuno continues her trash talk and Madoka gets angrier while losing her focus. Natsuno sees the opening and delivers a special attack that cuts through her chainsaw. Madoka starts crying, not wanting to give up on her brother, and transforms her weapon into a cannon. She shoots it and Natsuno activates her plot armor to slice the cannonball in two using her scissors. Madoka gives up and the two girls activate the power of friendship and become homies. Later, they all walk back together and they find out that Madoka has no connections with the slasher incidents, which confuses them even more. Then Kazuhito uses his full brain power and solves the case as he calls out Suzuna from hiding and shows her the proof of her taking the slasher case and making it bigger, starting by spreading rumors to attacking Afro, pretending she was the slasher. Suzuna reveals she did everything for Natsuno to get out of her writing drought by giving her the conflict she needed. Kazuhito calls her an idiot for having zero faith in her own writer. Suzuna is impressed to see Natsuno being so close and emotional with another person and tells Kazuhito that she will do anything to ensure Natsuno keeps writing masterpieces, even if it means throwing Kazuhito in front of Truckun to motivate her. Suzuna leaves and tells the dumb dog that he has zero proof and Kazuhito declares war on Suzuna as the final boss. Suddenly, Natsuno shows up and does a majestic front flip to make her entrance. She reveals that she knows everything and tells Suzuna to sit like a dog and confess, which Suzuna does easily. Natsuno doesn't take the disrespect and tells Suzuna that she can get over her drought by herself by dramatically throwing papers of her next book in the air, which makes Suzuna cream herself. She starts grabbing the papers and Natsuno flexes to Kazuhito to never underestimate his scissor-loving mommy. She steps on Suzuna as punishment and Suzuna makes happy noises to every step Natsuno does. Natsuno tells this oddball to get out of her way or she will stop treating her like trash and start being a sweetheart, which makes Suzuma's pain-loving self cry in terror. The next day, they walk Madoka to the train station and Natsuno gives her permission to borrow Kazuhito to give her some good old brother love, as she is also one of her readers. After she leaves, Suzuna pops up and reveals that she met the real slasher, where she violated him and left him in a garbage can to rot. Natsuno gets angry and Suzuna creams herself again, seeing Natsuno being dominant. A few days later, Kazuhito goes to his favorite bookstore to get new materials to use at night. He gets the good stuff, but the little stupid girl, Aoi, shows up to give him more trauma. She starts telling sob stories about how she will leave soon and close the bookstore. Then Natsuno steps on Kazuhito and warns him about cheating on her with Yaoi, or she will castrate him. Kazuhito tells Natsuno about the bookstore closing and gets depressed, but Natsuno tells him to just buy them somewhere else. Kazuhito refuses as he has a special relationship with that bookstore, meeting Sakura, the clerk, and others. Natsuno gets jealous and tells Kazuhito to stop talking about Sakura and her jugs while he has Natsuno's tiny jugs waiting for him. He continues his story of how he first came to the store after starting his new life in high school. He enters the store and sees an annoying old hag complaining to Sakura about Akiyama Shinobu's book being a dumpster fire, Kazuhito refuses the disrespect and puts the old hag in her place as an uncultured swine. Later, Sakura's dad comes in with a baseball bat, thinking Kazuhito is abusing Sakura, but later apologizes for the mistake. The father offers a free book as an apology and Kazuhito wastes no time picking a limited edition book. Both the father and Kazuhito acknowledge each other's love for books, and they become great friends. Kazuhito still holds the point card the old man gave him, and he missed his times as a human buying books from that store. He looks at Natsuno, and she's asleep after hearing his boring sea-level story. Kazuhito sees a chance to get his revenge and starts roasting her for having no jugs, but Natsuno wakes up with scissors in her hand and violates Kazuhito. The next day, he goes to the bookstore and sees Yayoi arguing with Sakura, and Yayoi runs away while taking the dog with her. Then Yayoi vents her frustration about the store closing and how she has ideas to save the store, but Sakura refuses to listen to the adorable little bastard. Yayoi pulls out a hat with the bookstore's name on it and plans to take Kazuhito and walk around wearing the hat to promote the store. Then they walk around and people pay attention, seeing the cute Kazuhito wearing a hat promoting the store. They meet Afro, and Yayoi asks him why he got a gigantic turd on his head, which hurts his feelings. Then Maxie shows up, and Yayoi's dumb brains think this narcissistic chick is the coolest thing she has ever seen and joins her degeneracy. Maxie sees the hat and plans to make the best store in Japan, but Yayoi refuses her offer and runs away. Meanwhile, Sakura is looking for her sister when her simp Hammy shows up and glazes Sakura's body from the upper to the lower cheeks. At the playground, Yayoi starts crying despite Kazuhito's best efforts to cheer her up. Kazuhito tries to tell her to go home, but Yayoi keeps crying as she can't understand him. Suddenly, Natsuno shows up, calling Kazuhito a cheater and a freak before using her scissors to do things that are non-PG. Natsuno notices Yayoi and tells her to go home, but she refuses to go back home as her sister is angry at her. Yayoi feels regret after fighting her sister, screaming that she hates her, but Natsuno gives her a life lesson that one apology is all it takes. Then, Yayoi goes back and apologizes to Sakura for all the bull she told her. Sakura sees the hat and hugs her sister. The sisters thank both Natsuno and Kazuhito for returning Yayoi and offer them a request. Natsuno takes the offer and asks them to tell her why the store is closing. Sakura declines all the rumors about the store closing, despite her father being a dog-pissed businessman who can't count to 3 without using his fingers. She asks where they heard about the rumors, and Natsuno snitch on the little Yayoi explains that she heard her parents fight and thought that their little scuffle meant they were getting divorced, the store closing, and having 2 different mommies and daddies. Sakura assures her that everything will be okay and the store will stay open. Later, Natsuno and Kazuhito go home, and Natsuno chases the dog to torture him for cheating on her. A few days later, Natsuno is reading the book Peppa Pig: The Next Generation when Natsuno walks in, asking him to help her find something. She asks him to help find her bra, and he tells her it's pointless for her to wear a bra as it holds nothing. After violating him, she asks him to use his nose. He starts sniffing her body for her scent, and Natsuno makes happy noises until he rummages around to find her pepperoni, and she smacks him for being a dog in heat. Then, Natsuno ties him up, and Suzuma is jealous of him, wanting Natsuno to tie her up too. Suzuma joins the search for Natsuno's favorite anicap bra, while Kazuhito runs away to read books, but Natsuno takes the book away from him, and Kazuhito demands an apology for violating his book. She eats him away to a bookshelf, and a box falls on top of him. He looks inside and finds a pump that makes your peaches turn to melons. They both fall silent as Kazuhito feels bad about her useless attempt to get that high school DxD physique, and Natsuno steps on him and cuts him up. Later, they expand their search for the bra, starting from the gym where Suzuma happily bashes her head in a locker as punishment for roasting Natsuno's lack of melons. Then, they consider the possibility of someone stealing it, and Natsuno promises to make the thief pay. Suddenly, a group of sweaty, muscular dudes show up and offer Natsuno an exercise to increase her cup size, and Natsuno shamelessly agrees. While the girls are pumping irons, Kazuhito goes back to the apartment to read, and there, he finds the bra they've been looking for. He remembers the night before, using the bra as his blanket, and now realizes that Natsuno might turn him into dog stew. Later, the girls find evidence that Kazuhito tried to go into the drawer to hide her bra. Meanwhile, Kazuhito is walking around to hide the bra for good when Yayoi jumps him and finds the bra on him. Yayoi scolds Kazuhito for being an underwear thief and plans to snitch him to the ops, but Kazuo takes the bra and runs away. At the bookstore, Natsuno asks Sakura about Kazuo's whereabouts, but she doesn't know where he is and reveals that the dog has become popular as he is fun to hold. Natsuno imagines Sakura holding her dog to her melons and gets jealous. Sakura tells Natsuno about her worry for the dog as there are many traffic incidents lately, and Natsuno wastes no time looking for him. Someone is following Natsuno, but she continues her hunt for the bra-stealing dog. Meanwhile, Kazuo wants to bury the bra when he hears a beautiful voice singing. He sees a maid monologuing like she's the princess of a castle instead of a broken maid. Kazuo recognizes her words from a book and keeps watching the maid dance and sing like a creep. Kazuo sneezes and the maid goes berserk, knowing someone is watching her embarrassing dance. She turns her broom into a weapon and aims to send the dog to the other side. Not far from them, Natsuno is getting close and hears her dog's screams. Kazuo avoids the maid's attacks and runs into the traffic. Suddenly, Truck-kun pops out to take another victim, but Natsuno saves and prevents him from becoming Kiyaru, the healer. Natsuno gets angry and pulls out her scissors to teach this maid a lesson. They face up for a fight, but the maid walks away as her duty calls to buy some potatoes for her vegetable on wheels master. Then, Natsuno finds the bra on her dog and feels embarrassed as the bra has a dog design on it. Kazuo realizes that she really likes dogs like him and uses his riz on her, but she pulls out her scissors and turns him into a hot dog. Later, they visit a hot spring and meet a receptionist who looks like Kazuo's old landlady, but she's a different person from Adola's. Kazuo goes straight to the book section and sees a book he hasn't read. Suddenly, Madoka pops up and shows Kazuo some Alabama hospitality after Natsuno invites her to join them. Then they stay in a room with a giant scissors in it to satisfy Natsuno's scissors kink. Madoka sees a photo of Natsuno and her family and Kazuo roasts Natsuno for looking ugly. He notices her family and notices that Natsuno doesn't pack the same melons as her family, and Natsuno cuts him up. Then, Madoka asks why there's only one futon and Natsuno blushes, causing Kazuo to think that tonight all three of them are bumping bellies together. Natsuno informs Madoka that she will have her own room. Madoka sees her chance and tries to take Kazuo with her, but Natsuno tells Madoka to know her place and hands off her damn dog. They start fighting over Kazuo and Natsuno promises that Madoka will call her sister-in-law. Suddenly, her alarms activates and they turn back to homies to go to the hot springs while warning the dog to not peek. They go to the bath and meet Sakura and her simp Hammy. All the girls get chummy. Hammy hides behind a rock out of embarrassment. Sakura tries to get her to join and Natsuno sees two big reasons why Amy is shy of her body. They start bouncing and Natsuno is jealous as hers can't do the same. Meanwhile, Kazuo is minding his business, reading books, and not falling for the temptation to peek at the girls. The girls come in and the drunk Natsuno pulls out her scissors, which makes a sound that hypnotizes the servers. Later, they go to dinner and Natsuno plans to make it romantic for her and the dog. They reach their destination and are greeted by the sight of pain-loving otaku dudes being tied up in front of their food. One of them is Suzuna, who is partaking there with her group of masochists, and they are all jealous seeing her get abused by Natsuno. One of the servants sees Natsuno and freezes while looking at her, while a creep is also stalking them. Later at night, Natsuno starts her plan to get it on with the dog and goes berserk on him in his sleep. The next day, Natsuno takes Kazuo on a date and sees Maxie and her group of simping bodyguards. Then they meet the maid, Moraib, and continue their beef. Natsuno realizes that Moraib has the same passion for blades as she does, and they become homies. Moraib leaves to buy things for her master and Natsuno goes to buy a whetstone for her scissors. Then they walk past a photo studio and Natsuno remembers when she was an annoying brat who refused to take a picture without her precious scissors. They go into the store and the owner gets hypnotized. Later, all the workers that walk past keep staring at them and get weird every time Natsuno pulls out her scissors. Then, Natsuno sharpens her scissors while in the bath, hoping her dog will peek at her. Maxie walks in and challenges Natsuno, but she doesn't care. Suddenly, all the workers turn into zombies and Kazuo runs to Natsuno to warn her. Natsuno explains absolute nonsense about why this is happening and Maxie tries to use her plots to defeat them, but they ignore her for Natsuno. The zombie workers clash blades with Natsuno. While the other girls are useless, Kazuo helps her and tells her to finish sharpening her scissors so they can win. Natsuno blushes seeing her dog in shining armor fighting for her, and it gives her motivation to sharpen her scissors. One of the zombies almost cuts Kazuo, but Madoka shows up and saves him. She transforms her chainsaw, and Natsuno jumps into the fight to create the two-chick wrecking crew. It turns into 2 against many, and the girls show them how it's done. Natsuno drops her love guidebook and gets angry at these lame-ass zombies after they step on it. She activates Kaioken and demolishes the whole inn. The next day, the workers don't remember what happened as the stalker failed to murder Natsuno. Days later, they visit the bookstore to get some night fun materials for the dog, and the stalker is still following them. Sakura recommends a book, and it is the same book that Kazuhito wanted to read back at the inn, and they accept it. Later, Kazuhito's spider senses go crazy as he can tell that someone was in their apartment, and instead of stealing, someone added a Rent-a-Girlfriend volume into their collections. At first, Natsuno doesn't believe him, but Kazuhito shows her to make her believe, and it's the same book they just bought. Meanwhile, Hammy is surprised to hear from Sakura that the sadistic mommy and her dog were just here buying the book. At the apartment, Kazuhito finishes the book and enjoys reading instead of finding clues. Beside him, Natsuno pulls out her glasses and reads the same book, and the sight of her in glasses makes Kazuhito's heart skip a beat. He looks at her plots and curves, while his animal instincts kick in. He jumps at her, but she eats him to the trash can. Then, he asks her to kick him out as his animal instinct makes him go wild for her. But instead of feeling disgusted, Natsuno is happy that her dog finally wants to get jiggy with his master. After some tomfoolery and questionable romance nonsense between a dog and a human, they go back and discuss the stalker who left them the book. Natsuno notices that the author might have lied, being an amateur, with the quality of their writing beating the great Junji Ito. They both agree that the book is similar to Natsuno's work, to the point that Natsuno herself feels as if she wrote it herself. They try to find out more about the author, Uzumaki Hotaru, and don't find anything. They change their approach and force Suzuna to snitch on who this secret author is. Then they find out everything about her, even the rumor that she has a powerful father, Shuzan, who is also an author who possibly used his influence to help publish her books, but is still missing a name. They plan to go to Hotaru's house, and Kazuhito knows the neighborhood is the same as his high school. On their way, they run into a bookstore, and Kazuhito tells Natsuno that he bought her book there during exam week, and completely rizzes her after saying that no exam is more important than her books. Meanwhile, the stalker is getting even closer to them. They go through a shortcut and get surrounded by people turning into a zombie-like state, like at the hot bath, which makes them think this is the work of the stalker. Natsuno improvises and yeets Kazuhito to the zombies, making PETA cry like a baby. After beating them all, the stalker walks in like John Doe from Seven, and it turns out to be Shuzan, the father. Shuzan praises Natsuno's battle skills and faces her for a showdown, but only to end up getting schooled and tied up like your ma on a Saturday night. Natsuno starts abusing the old man while demanding he explain why he did all of this nonsense, and finds out that his daughter, the author, Hotaru, wants Natsuno to read her book. Shuzan talks trash at Natsuno that he doesn't want her daughter to end up as an oddball author who has an obsession with dogs and scissors, and makes mobs of people attack her. Natsuno finds out that he is not behind the zombie people and that it was the work of Hotaru. Then, they go to Hotaru's high school to find clues about her true identity, and they split up. Instead of clue hunting, this book-addicted dog goes to the library to retrieve his hidden stash of limited edition Peppa Pig Shippuden. Suddenly, Hammy shows up and welcomes the dog as Kazuhito. Episode 10. Kazuhito realizes the plot twist of the decade that Hammy is the author, Uzumaki Hotaru, all this time. Years ago, Kazuhito was in high school when he stumbled upon a novel manuscript and read through the first few chapters. It turns out it belongs to Hammy, and Kazuhito begs her to continue it as it made Berserk look like the kissing booth. Then he finished reading the manuscript and Hammy was nowhere to be seen. He threatens to change the ending to what Game of Thrones did, and Hammy begs him not to. She starts tweaking about how she is useless trash and doesn't deserve to live, but Kazuhito praises her work even though it's a doo-doo copycat of Akiyama Shinobu, and encourages her to keep going and finish the novel. Then, she hides the manuscript in the library, and Kazuhito suggests that she join writing competitions, but Hammy refuses as she feels that her novel is not good enough for her to be an author. He rizzes her by saying that people like him are waiting for her to release her novel, and Hammy is completely smitten by him. She asks him to be her first reader if she ever releases her novel, and he agrees. Back in the present, She explains that her pen name Uzumaki Hotaru is an anagram of Kazuhito's full name. He starts barking, hoping for her to understand him, but she's unable to. She explains that she knew the dog was him by Sakura snitching that there is a particular dog who is addicted to books and who comes to her shop every day, and it reminds her of Kazuhito. She tells him how hard she worked to become an author, and Kazuhito feels proud seeing baby girl all grown up. She confesses that after he died, she couldn't continue her original manuscript and decided to be a fake author who used daddy's influence and took out her competition Natsuno. Meanwhile, Natsuno is at Hammy's desk when Hammy calls her out and challenges her to go to the roof. Then, Natsuno sees Kazuhito alongside Hammy and gets jealous, but is more surprised that a weak NPC trash like her is Uzumaki Hotaru. Uncalled for, Hammy roasts her lack of melons to provoke Natsuno and succeeds. Hammy challenges Natsuno not to a battle of scissors, but a writing contest so they can settle this like real authors. Then they both sit down face to face, accompanied by dramatic lighting, and start their legendary battle of writing. Kazuhito is in awe with how fast they write, like seeing Light Yagami in his prime, writing on his death note, demolishing potato chips. Hammy activates her special skill and writes with both hands, sending shivers to J.K. Rowling. Then her left hand gives up, and she activates another skill to make people sleep, but Natsuno is one step ahead and stabs herself with her scissors to wake herself up. Then, Hammy tries to use different skills, but Natsuno is not affected as her plot armor is thicker than One Piece women. Hammy feels hopeless and asks the great Natsuno what she thought of her novel that she has read. Natsuno praises it but tells her to keep going. Hammy pulls out the big IQ move and makes the whole room filled with mirrors, which makes Natsuno turn into a zombie against herself, not being able to finish the contest, while Hammy continues writing. Hammy explains the biggest of an explanation that in her novel she uses words to hypnotize her readers to turn into zombies and attack Natsuno specifically. Natsuno has enough and uses her mouth to write, showing these weaklings why she's superior. The contest ends and Natsuno wins, beating Hammy as a fraud. Hammy tries to take her own life, but Kazuhito stops her and shows her the old manuscript, telling her to write. Natsuno assures Hammy that she does have the skills to pay the bills and her novel is absolutely cracked. To give Hammy reassurance as a writer, Natsuno tells her to ask Kazuhito, who is her reader, if her writing is bad, and Kazuhito tells her that it's Michael Jackson bad, which is pretty good. Then they make peace with Hammy and Natsuno promises to read her novel if she continues writing, which makes Hammy cry, seeing her idol tell her that. The next day, Natsuno trains Hammy like a Jedi to her Padawan to start Hammy's training arc, while Kazuhito reads Natsuno's book and hypnotizes him to start licking Natsuno's luscious feet. Meanwhile, the maid, Maid, and the narcissistic TikTok star Maxi are on their way to a top-secret operation. Back at the apartment, Madoka comes to visit and asks Natsuno to borrow her kitchen so she can make her highly questionable, rarely delicious curry. Natsuno agrees with the condition that Madoka has to call her a sister and gives her blessing for Natsuno to marry Kazuhito and make 50 Shades of Dog, but Madoka refuses. Then Madoka starts cooking using her magic chainsaw and Kazuhito questions if he'll make it through the meal, but is surprised to smell that her curry smells normal. Kazuhito gets excited to finally eat some good curry, but only to be disappointed to see that his sister dips a blue Smurf in her curry. Then, they go to the bookstore, where Yoi is giving him a torture massage. Afro Samurai walks in to buy a book for his yee-ass haircut. Then, sweaty muscular dudes buy a book to prevent it from shrinking after using steroids. Then Suzuna walks in and buys a book to help her enjoy the world of pain, enjoying Degeneracy, written by a blonde crusader named La Latina. It impresses Kazuhito how amazing Sakura is in dealing with her weird customers, and the impressive book collections they have from Dune to How to Be a Sigma 101. Then Maxi's bodyguard, Johnny Sins, walks in to buy Natsuno's books and the books of Himhaji Momiji, as those two along with Maxi are the big three authors. Kazuhito chases him, but a random idle idiot stops him from his track and loses the Baldi's track. He walks to the park and sees the maid, Morib, singing again like she's in La La Land, and gets angry when knowing someone is watching. Morib attacks, but Kazuhito dodges her every attack due to the experience of getting abused by Natsuno. Morib almost hits him, but Natsuno shows up to save the day. The two girls go at it, going word for word, bar for bar, and stop when Morib starts monologuing like an idiot about what being a maid is all about. Suddenly, Maxie pulls up in the heli, flexing on these bro and reveals Natsuno as Akiyama Shinobu, which surprises the maid. To further forward her narcissism, she builds a 9-story statue for a writing contest, where contestants will write 9 short stories and be judged by 9 judges. Maxie challenges Natsuno to the battle to prove who is the best author in the world. Moraib gets angry and destroys the whole statue and all her pathetic men in black. She reveals that the best author in the world is her master, which turns out to be Hamhaji Momiji, the vegetable author on wheels. They start the triple threat battle between the authors, and Maxie goes against Natsuno, but Johnny Sins pulls up and takes Maxie away from this nonsense. Moraib leaves to shop for her master on wheels, and Kazuhito is disappointed as his dream to see authors battle in a shakugeki ends in a blink of an eye. The next day, Hammy meets Kazuhito and Natsuno at the bookstore, and she announces to Sakura that she will become an author, which confuses Sakura, as she thought she was already a writer, while Natsuno is happy to see her Padawan becoming a Jedi. Then Madoka shows up and delivers great news that she will be attending high school in Tokyo, while living in a dorm after what happened to her brother, Kazuhito. Madoka claims that she has moved on from her brother's death, but her face screams pain in the hope of getting better. Kazuhito is happy to see her sister trying her best to move forward. Then they go home and they let Madoka cook a rainbow frog curry on shrooms, and Natsuno runs away, leaving Kazuhito to eat the curry that might send him to isekai. Days later, Natsuno ignores Suzuna, who starts begging her to play with her, and Natsuno sends a Morse code to Kazuhito to ignore her as well, while Suzuna is begging him to call her a fat pig. Then, Kazuhito asks her why she's here, and Suzuna informs him that it's time for Natsuno to reveal herself to the world. For years, Natsuno has kept her identity secret in order for her fans to judge her on her skill and not the size of her melons. Suzuna believes that revealing herself to the world would benefit Natsuno more as an author, to promote her book like a celebrity or play trivia with Steve Harvey alongside Maxie, and motivate Natsuno to release her final book. She shows plenty of weird cosplays for Natsuno to wear for her public debut, and uses some magic to put the costume on Natsuno. Suzuna keeps putting her in different costumes, with the next costume more degenerate than the last. Madoka comes in with a literal volcano as her curry and starts trying the costumes while cooking weird curries. Then Hammy shows up and sees the costumes that she thinks will be perfect for her pathetic loser and meaningless life. Then Suzuna pulls out the big guns, and it turns out to be a swimsuit for Natsuno. Suddenly, Natsuno grabs Suzuna's head and cracks it before using her scissors to finish her off. Then, Suzuna has his second plan to make Natsuno drunk and make her nicer. Kazuhito is worried that the alcohol would make Natsuno crueler, but that makes Suzuna even more eager. Suzuna turns into the Flash and puts the alcohol in Natsuno's drink in slow-motion replay. Natsuno takes a drink, and the alcohol turns her into a sweet girl that freaks out Kazuhito. Natsuno treats Suzuna with love and respect, but Suzuna slowly loses her soul with every compliment she gets from Natsuno. Suzuna makes her drink more to turn her cruel, but Natsuno turns even kinder, and Suzuna dies after not getting the abuse she desperately wanted. Then, Natsuno picks up Kazuhito and shows him love, which disgusts him. He tries to roast the hell out of her, insulting her non-existent pepperoni, but Natsuno tears up. Kazuhito feels bad and says that flat jugs are love, flat jugs are life, which makes Natsuno happy and wants to marry him. In her head, Natsuno finally gets her happily ever after marrying her dog, with everyone congratulating her, while Kazuhito worries that her drink might have had crack in it. Then, Natsuno imagines her honeymoon with Kazuhito, with all her friends and family present, where everyone glazes the newly married couple. Afro delivers her a rainbow drink with loads of paracetamol in it, and she runs to the sunset while Maxie performs Route God in the background. Then the fantasy continues, and they start talking about having babies and what color should the children's room be. Kazuhito tells her that his books are more important and makes her sad. Back in reality, Natsuno carries Kazuhito to bed, and she pushes his little body on the bed while screaming that something hot is coming out of her, and she pukes on him. The next day, Kazuhito is traumatized by what happened, and Natsuno doesn't remember any of the degenerate stuff that she made him do the other night. At last, Natsuno finishes her final book, and Kazuhito is not pleased, as the book copied Dune, which is what all the sci-fi movies did. If you enjoyed this recap, then clap the like button and comment "Dogs claps the best cheeks." Subscribe to the channel if you're yet to for more plot-filled animes. If you like anime recaps like this, then watch this video right here.